Discover the incredible transformative journey of ancient Egypt, 5 surprising secrets revealed. Clara crouched in the dim light of her mentor's old office, fingers brushing against the dust-laden artifacts that had once sparked her passion. The framed photos and bones of a forgotten past harbored the whispers of her legacy, yet felt like shackles. At 34, her vibrant enthusiasm for history had dimmed, crushed beneath the weight of loss. The untimely passing of Dr. Lawson, a towering figure in archaeology, had siphoned away her spirit. Each day in the classroom felt like a sentence, an unending cycle of dull lecture notes and indifferent stares. She fought against the monotony, wrestling the knot of frustration in her stomach, when something caught her eye. There it was, a leather-bound journal nestled beneath piles of dust-covered texts. Opening it, her heart raced. Ancient scripts danced across the pages, languages she had once thrived on. But between the lines, crude maps sketched a path to a buried artifact, a link to her family's past that she had never known existed. As Clara dug deeper, she felt a swelling excitement that threatened to overflow. But with each secret she uncovered came a rising tide of doubt. Her colleagues met her enthusiasm with skepticism. Their raised brows and whispered concerns became a haunting echo in her mind. "Just the ramblings of an amateur," they muttered, questioning her right to pursue history. Fear gripped her. What if they were right? Mainstream scholars had little regard for passion without pedigree. In that small Montana town, reputation mattered over zeal. Clara felt the pressure mount within. Her ambition sparked a desire to validate herself in the very community that regarded her as just the history teacher. The thought of showcasing her discoveries filled her with dread. What if it all crumbled beneath her? The weight of her ancestors loomed like a storm cloud, both heavy and electrifying. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days dwindled as Clara wrestled with the burgeoning chaos. The journal had transformed her perspective, but left her grappling with her identity. Would uncovering the artifact liberate her lineage, or bury her in history's shadows? Each revelation only intensified her fears. The very essence of who she was felt tied to this discovery. She visualized presenting her research, yet the thought turned her stomach. What if her presentation was met with scorn, mockery? The night before the anticipated unveiling, Clara clutched the journal, fingers trembling as she read the final pages. In her search for identity, the stakes rose higher. Unveiling this history meant confronting truths she hadn't prepared for. She was left breathless, the last revelation hinting at an explosive intertwining of her legacy with the artifact that could alter everything she once believed. In the pulse of her heart, Clara could sense the coming storm. A clash between ambition and the weight of her roots now threatened to consume her. With the morning light creeping in, she understood the daunting path ahead required courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Would she risk everything to step into the narrative, standing up against the forces that counted her as nothing? As she turned the final page of the journal, her thoughts spun like a cyclone, uncertainty swirling all around her. The hour of truth approached, and Clara could almost feel the shadows of doubt closing in. Clara sat at the edge of her bed, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the room. The journal lay open beside her, an invitation to a world she had once found familiar. Yet now it felt like a riddle whispered from the depths of time. both beckoning her forward and mocking her hesitations. The weight of destiny lay heavy on her shoulders, and the remnants of a dormant resolve began to flicker within her. She couldn't afford to delay any longer. The unveiling of her findings at the local historical society loomed closer, a date etched into the calendar with no escape route. Clara breathed deep, seeking clarity amidst the chaos. The thoughts of her colleagues echoed through her mind like unrelenting waves. An amateur, the history teacher. Each phrase became a specter that haunted her resolve. But she realized today was not just about the artifact. It was about reclaiming her narrative. This was her chance to shatter the glassy veneer of her identity. With newfound determination, Clara reached for the journal. Each map she traced felt synonymous with her own path, winding and undefined. The historical significance anchored her confidence, transforming fear into a burgeoning sense of purpose. The realization struck her. Hidden within these pages iterated her ability not just to recount history, but to connect deeply with its echoes. Was this not what she had yearned to do? Clara decided to make a plan for the presentation. She would not merely regurgitate facts. She would intertwine her story with the greater narrative of ancient Egypt, showcasing the rich tapestry of lives intertwined with her own ancestral threads. Rereading the meticulous notes within the journal, she mapped out the presentation, focusing on the historical context, the importance of the artifact, and her personal stake in the discovery. As she jotted down the outline, her mind drifted to her mentor, Dr. Lawson. With shaking hands, she flipped through her meticulously prepared notes, feeling the sweat bead on her brow. "Good evening, everyone," Clara began, her voice steadier than her hands. The initial tremor faded as she settled into her narrative, describing the artifact's origin and the ancient civilization intertwined with her own lineage. As she spoke, she wove her personal story among the historical threads, a remarkable tapestry of resilience and discovery reflective of her own aspirations. Yet, even as she articulated her thoughts, a gnawing concern lingered in the corners of her mind. What if they still saw her as an outsider, a mere teacher without the gravitas of serious scholars? This is not an academic forum, she reminded herself. This is about passion. The moment she'd spent poring over the journal reminded her that her research was infused with her identity. It was deeply personal and intimately connected to the fabric of a culture long past. The first few questions after her presentation were mundane, mostly surface-level inquiries. Clara felt the tension within her coiling tighter with each query, her heart beating a frantic tempo. Then, unexpectedly, an older gentleman from the audience challenged her, skeptical of her interpretations. "How do you know that your lineage has any genuine connection to this artifact?" he pressed, eyes narrowing as he spoke. The air seemed to thicken around her. She could feel the scrutiny of the entire room bearing down. Clara struggled to steady her breath, the question rattling her. This was the moment her resolve would either solidify or shatter. Instead of retreating into self-doubt, she faced the gentleman with unwavering strength. "Because, sir," she began, her voice slicing through the tension, "the journey of discovery begins within ourselves. This artifact isn't just a relic, it's a key unlocking generations of stories, and mine is woven through the very fabric of this history." With that admission, Clara realized something profound. Her true challenge was not about convincing the audience, but embracing her narrative unconditionally. The words resounded in her mind like a drumbeat, pushing out the trepidation. Her lineage was not merely an anecdote. It was an invitation to share in the collective journey of resilience that transcended time. As the dialogue unfolded, she responded with a newfound passion, each rebuttal sharpening her confidence. Clara listened and engaged, realizing that every skeptic could become an ally if she allowed her personal investment to shine through. The discomfort of uncertainty she had initially felt morphed into an exhilarating exchange, a vibrant conversation that transcended the boundaries of historical academia. However, just as a flicker of hope ignited within her, a devastating thought clouded her mind. If she found acceptance here, could she continue to uphold the integrity of the stories she unearthed? As questions swirled, the atmosphere shifted, and she could feel the intensity within the room deepen. "Clara," a voice called out from the back, "what will you do next with this discovery? Will it change you?" Her heart raced again. What did it mean to change? The answer loomed ahead, shrouded in uncertainty, waiting to be unveiled, just like the artifact she had shared. Determined but deeply unsettled, Clara realized her journey was far from over. With every beat of her heart whispering 1,000 new possibilities, she stepped back, ready for whatever might come next. How would she navigate the complexities of her newfound voice and the latent questions that had emerged from her own identity? The unspooled threads of her narrative beckoned, and Clara knew she had to face them head-on. Clara walked out of the venue, the echoes of applause still ringing in her ears. Outside, the late evening air felt alive with electric anticipation, but within her a tempest brewed. Every step away from the podium was not just a retreat from the spotlight, it was a confrontation with a haunting uncertainty. The applause faded into a vague murmur, replaced by her own thoughts spiraling into doubt. Would she truly embrace the changes ahead, or would she fall back into the familiar shadows of self-doubt she had battled for so long? As she reached her car, Clara hesitated, staring at the ancient artifact nestled within its protective case in the passenger seat. That object, a vessel of history, had changed her perspective, yet now it felt like an anchor, tying her to a past she was eager to explore, but also to escape. The questions posed during her presentation haunted her. Why had she sought validation from colleagues? Why did she crave their acceptance? They held no power over her narrative unless she relinquished it. Taking a deep breath, Clara opened the car door and slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against her skin. The dashboard lights flickered vividly, illuminating the indecision clouding her mind. She was at a crossroads, and as much as she wanted to embrace this personal evolution, a part of her feared the magnitude of the transformation ahead. Driven by an insatiable urge to reflect, she navigated the quiet streets of her hometown, the familiar scenery providing little comfort. With each turn, she mulled over the skeptical gentleman's challenge. There had been a sense of authenticity in her voice during that moment of confrontation, something she had only seen glimpses of in the past. Was that the real Clara emerging, or a new persona fostering her willingness to engage? Arriving home, Clara parked the car and sat quietly for a moment, staring into the darkened windows. Inside, a sanctuary of books and documents awaited her, eerily still. She felt a stir of excitement intermixed with anxiety as she climbed the stairs to her study. This was her domain. Every corner resided with the weight of her research, her ambitions, her aspirations. Once inside, Clara shuffled through her notes, each piece a testament to countless hours of studying, writing, and questioning. She glanced at a framed photograph of her mentor, a woman whose unwavering belief in her abilities had once ignited Clara's passion for history. Would she have been proud of her for stepping into the unknown? Or would she question Clara's intentions and pursuit? With purpose, Clara settled in front of her laptop. The challenge now was to document not just her findings, but her feelings, the evolving narrative of her own identity intertwined with those artifacts. She opened a blank document, the cursor blinking expectantly. It was time to shed the need for validation and instead provide a candid account of her journey. Word by word, she crafted her thoughts, interlacing her personal truths with historical context. The growing introspection came with both clarity and trepidation. This was more than just an exploration of the past. It was a declaration of her place within it. As the pages filled, the doubts began to transform into revelations. Her lineage was not just a connection to history, but the very foundation on which she would build her future. But questions still tugged at her consciousness. As Clara eliminated one fear, countless more emerged. What legacy was she prepared to embrace? Was she ready to challenge historians and peers alike while staying true to her integrity? A sudden urgency surged through her, igniting a fire within. She was on the brink of a reckoning, and with it came an unexpected realization. Her next step wouldn't just define her career, it would redefine how she viewed herself. Just as she was about to dive deeper into her writing, her phone buzzed violently on the desk, jolting her from the moment of clarity. She hesitated. Did she want to let the outside world intrude? But as she knocked the device over, a sharp pang of instinct pushed her to answer. What awaited her on the other side could shape her story in ways she hadn't anticipated. She reached for the phone, heart racing once more. Who was it, and how might they influence her uncertain path? Clara took a deep breath and answered the call, her heart drumming in her chest. The voice on the other end was familiar yet distant, a colleague from the academic community, Dr. Thompson. She hoped their conversation would drift into routine exchanges about research, but the urgency in his tone shattered that expectation. "Clara, I need to speak with you. Can you meet me tomorrow at Legends Cafe? It's important," he said, his voice strained. "What's going on?" she asked, a sense of foreboding settling in the pit of her stomach. "It's about the conference and your presentation," he replied, his words carefully chosen. Concerns. The word lingered like a dark cloud. Clara felt her stomach twist, unleashing a wave of anxiety. What could they possibly say? Had she made a mistake in challenging long-held beliefs during her talk? Would anyone else recognize the clarity she had finally stumbled upon within herself? "I'll be there," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. After they hung up, Clara's mind raced. She paced the room, her notebooks and artifacts forgotten as she revisited the words of skepticism she'd faced before. The magnitude of her ambition both thrilled and terrified her. She needed to decide whether she would cower from scrutiny or embrace the opportunity to engage in deeper inquiry and self-affirmation. She couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Thompson represented another obstacle. Yet, amid her swirling thoughts, a yearning for authenticity began to burgeon. If she was truly committed to her evolution, the reflections and challenges he might present could become stepping stones rather than barriers. But was she prepared for a confrontation about her newfound truths? Clara navigated through her notes, compiling insights into the obscure history she had unearthed. She wanted to not just present her findings, but to convey her passionate commitment to challenging the narratives. Her heart raced at the thought of her peers reacting to her audacity, and the anticipation kindled a fierce determination inside her. As night fell, Clara found herself submerged in the act of writing again, her thoughts flowing more freely. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, documenting historical inaccuracies she intended to address. The artifact, once a burden, transformed into the linchpin of her argument. It symbolized what she stood for, the convergence of personal experience and greater historical truths. Each sentence solidified her burgeoning identity as a historian not afraid to risk trial and judgment. In the charged atmosphere of her study, Clara felt the impending wake of change. Approaching her meeting with Dr. Thompson required preparation, not just for his criticisms, but equally for her own assertions. This moment could either affirm her newfound direction or push her back into silence. Could she confront her fears while standing her ground? When morning arrived, her mind was a battleground, doubt and courage at odds with one another.
She donned her favorite blazer, an external armor against the pressures she sensed awaited her. The drive to the cafe felt interminable, tickling the edges of her confidence. Sitting at the table where they had agreed to meet, Clara's pulse quickened as the minutes passed. Would she reveal the truth behind her resolute stance, or would she find herself retreating under the weight of disapproval? The door swung open, and Dr. Thompson entered, scanning the room before his gaze fell on Clara, his expression unreadable. As he approached, Clara inhaled deeply, ready to navigate the treacherous waters of this pivotal moment.
Little did she know, the true significance of their discussion would stretch far beyond professional criticism. The confrontation would redefine her standing not only in academia, but within her very own identity. "Clara," he began, taking a seat and leaning forward, "we have a lot to discuss." As he spoke, Clara braced herself. The conversation ahead would either carve a clear path forward or provoke her into deeper self-discovery. Was she ready to face what lay ahead? The ground beneath her seemed both firm and fragile, and she knew this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. The cafe buzzed with the hum of conversations, but to Clara it all faded into the background. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting patterns on the table, yet it was a dull landscape compared to the storm brewing within her. Dr. Thompson's posture suggested he was ready for a serious discussion, and as he settled into his seat, Clara sensed the weight of expectations pressing down on her. "Let's get straight to it," he said, his calm demeanor contrasting with the uneasiness spiraling inside her. "Your presentation has stirred quite a conversation among the faculty. Some see the potential for breakthrough. Others, well, they're less enthusiastic." She took a moment to absorb his words, feeling both honored and alarmed by the idea of others discussing her thoughts, opinions, and challenges. "What concerns did they express?" Clara managed to ask, her voice steady, though her insides twisted. "There are reservations about how you addressed the established narratives surrounding your topic. Some believe you've overlooked crucial evidence and are treading dangerous territory," he explained, his tone measured but still firm. Clara's heart raced. She had feared this would be the case. The nagging skepticism of her authority, spiraling down into her confidence, echoed her own self-doubt. "And you," she countered, curiosity tempered by apprehension, "what do you think?" "I think you've touched on something profound," he said, his eyes narrowing with intensity. "Your passion is evident, but you need to support your ideas more rigorously. A broader context will help you frame your arguments. This is an opportunity to sharpen your claims." His encouragement ignited a flicker of hope in her heart. She hadn't imagined he would see value in her work. Perhaps this was part of the challenge that lay before her. "So, you believe I should expand on my findings and rethink my approach?" "I believe you should explore those findings deeply," he urged, leaning back and giving her a thoughtful glance. "You have the capacity to contribute something unique to this discipline, Clara. Don't shy away from it. Lean into that discomfort." Clara felt a rush of determination wash over her. This moment was no longer only about defending her ideas. It was about embracing them fully. "What if I fail?" she found herself asking, her voice almost a whisper. "Failure is part of the journey," Dr. Thompson replied. "The great historians were not without their critics. What matters is how you respond to that. Do you allow the fear of criticism to silence you, or do you let it fuel you? Dr. Ammer, one of our most esteemed faculty members, faced similar challenges early in his career. Now look where he is." His words resonated deeply. Clara was not simply here to seek acceptance, but rather to add her voice to the discourse. She envisioned herself standing on that stage, facing her peers. She'd articulate her findings, amplifying her passion despite the fear swirling around her. The conversation flowed into strategies for articulating her historical research while grounding it in rigorous evidence. Each word illuminated her path forward and dissolved the doubts that plagued her. She began to understand that this was not merely a presentation, but an assertion of her identity as a scholar, an unfolding invitation to the rest of the academic world. As they wrapped up their discussion, Clara felt a new determination surging within her. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson," she said, surprising herself with the clarity and conviction in her voice. "Use this experience," he urged, his gaze unwavering. "You are on the precipice of something significant. Don't lose sight of what you're capable of." Clara left the cafe invigorated, yet the lingering uncertainty still twitched at the back of her mind. As she clutched her notes, she realized that her journey was just beginning. Her task was to transform vulnerability into strength, to wield insights like armor as she stepped into a world brimming with judgment and expectations. She had fought against conformity. Now she needed to create her own path. With each step, she felt resolved, yet daunted. The narrative was hers to shape, and the ensuing challenge loomed larger than personal validation. She would face the critics, not just as a historian confronting her field, but as a woman continually redefining her identity. Could she truly navigate this landscape of judgment and emerge more clearly defined? In that moment, she understood. True growth lay not in avoiding conflict, but in preparing to claim it. The tides of change swept through her as she prepared for the next phase in her journey. But as she drafted her plan, another thought struck her. What if her biggest challenge wasn't external after all? What if it was facing her own misconceptions about herself? Clara spent the next few days engulfed in an intense study of her topic, diving deep into the historical narratives that had become her battleground. She meticulously revisited every piece of literature she had previously skimmed, taking copious notes in the margins of academic journals and books. The weight of expectation loomed over her like a storm cloud as she questioned her very understanding of the subject matter.
Was her interpretation valid, or had she been driven solely by passion without the necessary evidence to substantiate her claims? Each evening, she sat at her desk with coffee slowly losing its heat, poring over her findings until her eyelids drooped. She felt exhausted but invigorated simultaneously. The fear of failing turned into a fierce determination to understand the discipline she was becoming part of, a necessity born from Dr. Thompson's encouragement. On the third day, seated at a crowded library table surrounded by fellow students, the unfamiliar sensation of purpose washed over her. She began to communicate her ideas to peers, seeking their views and inviting critical discussions. Clara found herself actively debating in small groups, forcing herself to articulate her arguments clearly while simultaneously asking them to challenge her perspective. Each conversation felt like a stepping stone, gradually reinforcing her confidence. Yet amidst her progress, doubt crept in at the most unexpected moments. One afternoon, Clara encountered a journal article meticulously dissecting a historical phenomenon she intended to reference in her presentation. It positioned her interpretations as naive and almost reckless, an implicit indictment that sent her stomach churning. For a moment, she felt paralyzed, questioning the very foundation of her research. In the depths of her anxiety, her mind spiraled into the familiar territory of self-criticism. Was she merely an imposter in this academic world? Every ounce of confidence began to drain as she replayed disapproving faces of her peers in her head. Then the realization dawned upon her. If she shied away from these confrontations with her own frailties, she wouldn't grow. She decided to reach out to Dr. Thompson once more, despite feeling vulnerable and exposed. Even as she typed the email, a frenzied mix of apprehension and resolve coursed through her veins. How could she possibly ask for further guidance after her previous conversation? But didn't she also owe it to herself to seek clarity? The next day, as they met again, Clara chose to reveal her insecurities. "I came across a paper that harshly critiques my framework, and She hesitated, feeling the weight of her vulnerability. "I'm not sure how to proceed. It feels like I'm swimming against a tide too strong for me to overcome." Dr. Thompson listened intently, his expression encouraging yet probing. "You're experiencing what every scholar faces, something called the intellectual wrestling match, where self-doubt battles with conviction. This is a pivotal moment for you. How will you turn that discomfort into a learning experience?" Clara sat quietly, pondering. His words illuminated a path away from fear. "What if," she began, "I examined the critiques and incorporated those perspectives? Rather than seeing them as obstacles, what if I turned them into opportunities for dialogue?" "Exactly, Dr. Mackay."
Thompson replied, a spark of pride dancing in his eyes. "You're not just defending your work, you're enhancing it. Acknowledge those critiques and let them inform your approach. Consider them a part of the narrative you want to create." Emboldened by this realization, Clara set her sights on her evolving presentation. She embraced the idea of confronting criticism head-on, framing her arguments in a way that acknowledged dissent while providing her unique narrative. The fear of failure began to morph into excitement, a thrilling dance with intellectual rigor. As she sat back down to her notes, a surge of clarity inspired her next steps. She envisioned the presentation not just as a defense, but an invitation for dialogue, an exploration where her findings could coexist with opposing views. Determination surged through her as she pulled out her outline, ready to reshape her discourse. But just as she felt the exhilaration of this new direction, another nagging thought emerged. What if, beneath all this intellectual resolve, there lay an unrecognized fear of truly stepping into her own power? Clara closed her eyes momentarily, envisioning the upcoming presentation. Would she be ready to confront the most difficult critic of all, herself? As Clara embarked on her new path of exploration, she could feel the weight of her internal conflict pressing against her chest. Each line of her outline represented not just her research, but her personal journey, a journey she desperately needed to share. Yet a nagging voice whispered that presenting her work was akin to revealing a part of herself she had always kept hidden. The following afternoon, she returned to the library, now equipped with a clearer objective. The once intimidating rows of books had transformed into allies in her quest for understanding, yet doubt still lurked. Clara scanned the shelves and pulled texts both familiar and foreign, determined to bolster her arguments with robust references. The realization about incorporating critiques had given her direction, but it also deepened the chasm of self-doubt. What if she faltered when faced with an audience? As she flipped through pages, absorbing knowledge, Clara felt a subtle shift within herself. She was no longer merely gathering information. She was now synthesizing movements of thought. This process birthed new connections. She jotted down phrases of inspiration, crafting sentences that felt more like assertions than timid observations. The excitement of making discoveries fueled her enthusiasm, generating a palpable energy that began to dispel her fears, if only slightly. That evening, she gathered her friends for a rehearsal presentation. Her stomach twisted as she stood, gazing at their expectant faces. This wasn't just practice, it was an opportunity to navigate her fears in a controlled environment. The first few words felt unfamiliar, hesitant, an echo of the self-doubt that had become her unwelcome companion. Yet, as she spoke, fragments of confidence began to weave into her narrative. The rhythm of her argument flowed more seamlessly than she anticipated, and she felt a thrill of empowerment surge as she collapsed misconceptions and connected diverse viewpoints. Post-presentation, her friends offered feedback, some critical, some encouraging. Clara found herself eagerly listening to their insights.
This interaction ignited a fire within her that contradicted her previous apprehensions. They challenged her ideas in ways that felt constructive rather than hostile, proving to be allies in her growth. During the discussion, one friend posed a question that rattled her. "Clara, what if the most pivotal thing you can discover is why you genuinely care about this topic?" It caught her off guard. She had been so engrossed in external validation that she had not connected with her intrinsic motivations. In the silence that enveloped her after the question, Clara's mind raced. Why did this history resonate with her? The ancient struggles, the triumphs against adversity, the deeply human stories. It was more than intellectual curiosity. It was a desire to understand the nuances of resilience, the fabric of humanity that persevered through tumult. This understanding lit a new flame. Her work was not just an academic exercise. It was a personal bridge to her own identity, a reflection of her values. With newfound resolve, she committed to fleshing out this narrative in her presentation. Clara began to recognize the authenticity that shone through vulnerability. As she turned her focus inward, a sense of clarity and purpose enveloped her. She realized that not only did she need to address critiques, but she also needed to make her passion irrefutably visible. As the days dwindled before her presentation, the stakes escalated. She had a choice to make: present a polished facade or reveal her journey, intertwined with her discoveries. Clara stood at this metaphorical crossroads, balancing on the precipice of transformation. On the eve of her presentation, she lay in bed, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. What would she ultimately choose? Would she confront the audience not just with the depth of her research, but with the depth of her soul? Tomorrow held the promise of revelation, but it also bore the weight of risk. The moment had arrived where she would no longer shrink from judgment. The challenge loomed. Could she truly embrace her own power in her academic voice? The morning of her presentation dawned with an odd blend of clarity and chaos swirling in Clara's mind. As she dressed, each article of clothing felt heavy, a physical reminder of the stakes attached to today. She smoothed down her blouse, feeling the fabric pinch against her skin, as if it too was pressing her to conform to some expected image. But beneath that weight, a flicker of resolve burned brighter. Today was the moment she would emerge, raw, honest, and unapologetically herself. The auditorium loomed ahead, its doors tall and imposing. Stepping inside, Clara was met with rows of faces, some familiar, others unfamiliar, but all possessing an air of expectation that suffocated her for a brief moment. Swallowing hard, she felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. She scanned the room, seeking solace in the smiles of her friends who had come to support her. Their presence was a balm, a reminder that she wasn't alone on this stage of self-revelation. As her time approached, she gathered her notes, reviewing the carefully constructed narrative she'd developed over the past weeks. No longer was it just a collection of facts. It had morphed into a tapestry woven with her own threads of experience and emotion. She intended to share not just informational content, but a glimpse of her journey, her struggles, her connections, and her discoveries. Clara's name echoed through the speaker system, and she made her way to the front, legs feeling as if they were glued to the ground. Taking a deep breath, she recalled the supportive words of her friends. This was not the time to hide. Vulnerability could be her greatest strength. With her voice trembling, Clara began her presentation. The first couple of sentences came out stutteringly, as if her fear was manifesting. But as she transitioned into the core of her content, something remarkable happened. The words, initially stilted, began to flow. A narrative embedded with her passions emerged, transforming her fear into fervor. She expressed why ancient history fascinated her, not merely as a detached academic, but as a seeker of truth about the human condition. As she spoke vividly about the struggles people faced over centuries and how those stories resonated through time, Clara felt a shift within herself, reconciling the parts of her she had kept at bay. She shared anecdotes that encapsulated her personal connection to the material, moments from her childhood when she first felt the tug of historical injustice, and her own journey through doubt and determination. Her voice steadied, growing in authority as she made eye contact with the audience, grounding herself in the shared journey of discovery rather than standing atop an unreachable pedestal. Applause greeted her as she concluded, sweeping away much of the lingering tension. Yet, amidst the cheers, a quiet doubt flickered. What if they had only appreciated her performance, not the content? What if her vulnerabilities hadn't resonated as intended? Amid her uncertainty, a question rose in her mind. What did genuine engagement look like? Would she be brave enough to follow up, seek feedback, and engage with criticisms rooted in concern for her work? As she mingled with her peers post-presentation, a conversation with a professor shifted the focus. Talking about interactive dialogue, Clara felt both exhilarated and threatened as the professor probed deeper into her motivations.
Clara, your insight today was compelling, but I encourage you to reflect on your conclusions. Are they truly grounded in our historical landscape, or merely a reflection of your personal views? The walls of confidence she had built during her presentation started to tremble. She had dared to uncover her truth, but was it enough for academic rigor? The professor's question hung in the air, like a challenge wrapped in curiosity, pushing her back to that initial crossroads of self-doubt. She realized that her journey wasn't over. It had merely begun. There were more layers to peel back, more connections to uncover, and deeper insights to explore. As Clara stepped out of the auditorium, a sense of determination surged within her. Searching for answers would demand more than the stories she had already told. It required an exploration of the complexities behind the resilience that intrigued her. Could she navigate the line between personal passion and academic integrity without losing herself in the process? The weight of the answer pressed upon her chest once again, yet she felt buoyantly challenged to rise to this occasion. With renewed purpose, she pledged to delve deeper, to engage with her past, those formidable figures she admired, and even her critics. There was a fresh sense of urgency bubbling within her. What truths awaited in that deeper dive? Clara wondered if this next chapter would reveal even more about herself than she anticipated. A promise of transformation filled with anticipation and mystery that would push her to redefine her identity yet again. Clara stood at the threshold of her classroom, a sense of anticipation pulsating through her veins as the morning sun streamed in through the window. The chaotic whirlwind of the past weeks had led her to this crisp, defining moment, where she would reclaim her identity not only as a historian, but as a woman fiercely proud of her heritage. Today wasn't just about addressing an audience, it was about embodying her narrative with authenticity and strength. Previous doubts felt like vestiges of a distant past as she turned to face her students. She could still hear the echoing applause from her last presentation, mingled with the questions and challenges that had surfaced since. Those moments had spurred her to new heights, a cascade of growth that had dismantled the invisible barriers of self-doubt. Clara had transformed from merely the history teacher into a passionate advocate for the stories that connected her to her roots and the world. In an unexpected twist of fate, the skepticism she had feared had ignited her hunger for knowledge, compelling her to dive deeper into her subject matter. As she shared her unique lineage entwined with ancient Egypt, she sensed a newfound gravitas in her voice. The historical narratives transformed from abstract facts into living stories that resonated within her, weaving seamlessly through the fabric of her teaching.
With unwavering confidence, Clara began her lesson, interweaving tales of ancient civilizations with her own journey, threading personal anecdotes about her discovery of the artifact and explaining its significance. The classroom, once filled with apathetic gazes, now thrummed with curiosity. Students leaned in, engaged, and eager to grasp concepts of resilience that transcended time and cultures. Clara felt invigorated, every eye in the room reflecting the passion she had fought so hard to reclaim. Days turned into weeks, and Clara's reputation began to shift. Colleagues who once dismissed her pursuits now approached her for insights, intrigued by her compelling narrative and rigorous research. Clara had stepped not only into the realm of academia, but took on a role as a bridge builder, connecting those around her with the rich narratives of history. But it wasn't enough for Clara to bask in newfound approval. She sought deeper connections beyond the classroom. She began to establish a mentorship program, inviting young historians to explore their passions. With each shared experience, she fostered a community where vulnerability cultivated strength, mirroring her own journey. It felt audacious yet satisfying to champion upcoming scholars, creating a safe space that celebrated curiosity and inquiry. One evening, as she stood before a group of eager students at a local historical symposium, Clara faced a wave of familiar faces, friends, colleagues, scholars. The daunting atmosphere transformed into an intimate dialogue where she showcased her research one final time, not merely as a presentation on artifacts, but as a vivid tapestry of shared human experience. When the audience erupted into applause, Clara felt more than merely recognized. She felt validated. Each clap resonated with promises fulfilled, echoes of struggle metamorphosizing into triumph. What had initially been an avenue of personal exploration blossomed into a full-fledged call for authenticity in historical discourse, a celebration of passion, exploration, and open-minded inquiry. As she stepped down from the podium, a young girl approached her, eyes shimmering with excitement. "Miss Clara, you made history feel alive. Can we explore it together again?" It was a simple question, but one that solidified Clara's transformation. The shift from individual doubt to collective empowerment sparked a flame of purpose within her. Clara realized she had not merely achieved professional recognition, she had conquered the chains of limitation that had held her back. She stood on solid ground now, armed with a profound understanding of who she was, a historian, a mentor, a passionate advocate for connection through history. Today, Clara wasn't the history teacher. Today, she was Clara, an unstoppable force of knowledge, capable of illuminating the past while shaping future generations.
And that realization filled her with an unshakable satisfaction that warmed her spirit with undeniable fulfillment. This moment was not just a conclusion to her journey, but an open door to new possibilities. The past had informed her, shaped her, and propelled her forward. As she ventured into the next chapter, her heart brimmed with clarity and purpose. Clara had arrived. This was her authentic self at last. If you've resonated with Clara's journey of transformation and personal accomplishment, you need to subscribe now and witness more incredible stories of overcoming adversity. Leave a like immediately to support the channel and feed the algorithm. Comment below to share your thoughts and reactions to this finale. You can't miss out. Share this video with at least 5 friends who crave inspiration and empowerment. Don't wait even one more second. Your support matters.